Do you want to know the latest on what's happening with the Renters' Rights Bill? Facts, not fiction. What we actually know and what we still don't know. There's a lot of myths and misinformation floating around. But if you want to know the truth on where we are, you're in the right place. In this video, I take you through the things that we know for definite. Well, sort of, subject to the House of Lords agreeing to what the House of Commons have said. And this will help you sort out fact from fiction. Because I do make it clear what we don't yet know. And it's not actually strange, the fact that we don't know all the details, because a lot of the regulations are due to be published after royal assent. So we're thinking, end of April, beginning of May. And some of the provisions might need a consultation. And stick around until the end, because I'm going to debunk some of the myths that many of you may have heard in landlord forums, on social media, and even on YouTube. So then you can stop worrying about them. I'm Suzanne Smith, lawyer turned landlord, and I run the Independent Landlord blog and this YouTube channel to bring you with reliable guidance about what's going on in the private rented sector. And you can have a look at the blog version of this YouTube video on the link here. Disclaimer: this isn't legal advice, and don't take everything you watch on YouTube as gospel, even my videos. First of all, where are we? And are we nearly there? Well, the Renters' Rights Bill is currently in the House of Lords, and I have it on good authority that it should receive royal assent after the Easter recess. And they've got quite a long recess that takes up most of April. And the commencement date, when all the main things come into force, probably won't be until after the summer. But we still don't know exactly when, and we don't know that that's definite. That's just my best guess. I've been saying for a long time I don't think it's going to happen before the summer, and let's hope I'm right. I hope it will be something sensible that will give us, landlords and letting agents and the rest of the people who help us run our businesses, time to prepare. Something like 1st of January, but maybe that's a bit of a pipe dream. We're at a tricky stage with the bill, because although we know the broad outline and a lot of the key provisions, the government may still add more clauses, as it did a couple of weeks ago. And another really important thing, and I say this as somebody who worked as a qualified solicitor for 25 years, the law, the statute, what's the words on the page are one thing. What in the end matters is how the courts will interpret it. And I'm sure that there's all sorts of things that we think are yellow, and then when the courts come along, it might be orange or red or blue, because we don't know until it starts going through the courts. And there will be unexpected interpretations. That's not unusual. And there will be, to use what has become a cliche, unintended consequences or intentional consequences, depending on your worldview. And that makes it difficult to prepare, because we don't know exactly what's going on. But I believe that knowledge is power. And even though we don't have perfect information, we should still be looking at what might be coming. So let's start by what we do know, as I'm recording this on the 25th of January. So here it is. It is big. It's 250 pages, and that's double spread. And when Matthew Pennycook says it's simpler regulation.
But the bill will also ensure that good landlords enjoy simpler regulation.
Well, that's just not true. It's 20% longer than the Renters' Reform Bill. And that was the bill that the Conservatives dropped just before the election last year. And that was long enough. Here's what we do know about the changes that the Renters' Rights Bill will be making to existing tenancies as well as new tenancies, assuming that the government doesn't make further amendments. So, first of all, when the commencement date happens, so, that might be October, January the 1st, whenever it is, all existing tenancies will move to the new assured tenancy regime, all in one go. And after that date, all new tenancies will have to be on the new regime. Now, this includes abolishing Section 21, but it also means a lot of other things. For instance, all fixed-term tenancies will immediately become periodic overnight. So if you're a tenant, or if you're a landlord who has a tenant who's in the middle of a fixed term tenancy, well, at the stroke of midnight, they will be able to give 2 months' notice to quit, to expire at the end of a rent period if they want to at any time. Unlike the Conservatives' Renters Reform Bill, there won't be a longer transition period for existing tenancies. Let's hear what Matthew Pennycook has to say about that.
To avoid confusion and to ensure that renters on existing tenancies do not have to wait even longer for the threat of arbitrary evictions to be lifted, we intend to apply the new system to all tenancies in a single stage.
And as you can see, the government has made it very clear that they want the changes to come into effect for new and existing tenancies on the same day. The next thing you need to know is that there will be no more renewals because fixed-term tenancies won't exist. Now, landlords may increase the rent on an annual basis using Section 13, and I've done a video on that, but it won't be a renewal because there'll be no fixed term to extend. Tenants will have the right to terminate with 2 months' notice in writing to expire at the end of the rent period at any time. And that includes whether or not they're in the middle of a fixed-term tenancy on the commencement date. And after the commencement date, if you have a rent review clause in your contract, it will be null and void, and you will only be able to increase rent by using the Section 13 process. This means that landlords won't be able to increase rent by an addendum or letter unless they have first served a Section 13 notice. Another important change is that if a tenant challenges a rent increase in the first tier tribunal, the new rent won't come into force until after the tribunal has come to a decision. So this is going to delay when a rent increase will come into effect, because not only are landlords going to have to give 2 months' notice instead of one, if the tenant's not happy, it will be delayed until after the tribunal has come to a decision, and there are delays in the tribunals at the moment. Another big change is that the maximum rent period is a month. Now, I know that there are lots of people at the moment who might pay on a quarterly or a termly basis, but from the commencement date, any term in a tenancy agreement that says that tenants must pay rent in advance at intervals of more than 1 month will be null and void. Now, that won't stop tenants from paying it voluntarily after they've signed the agreement and once they're there, but landlords can't make it an obligation of the tenancy agreement. For instance, a student will be able to pay their rent a term in advance when they receive their loan if they want to do that for budgeting purposes, but the landlords can't make them do it. And that's either in the contract or informally, because if you ask them or tell them that they need to do it and don't put it in the contract, that could be interpreted as a variation to the tenancy. So that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour about what we do know. Here's what we don't know. And I'm doing this because I've had so many questions from people asking me about these details. So I thought I'd just do it in a YouTube video, and you can also have a look at it on my blog as well. And as I said at the beginning, landlords, letting agents, and tenants, we're all in the dark about some of the detail about what's going to happen. And it makes it difficult for us to plan and what to say to tenants. And as a general point, we still don't have a final version of the bill, and we might not get that for a couple of months. And we won't get the implementing regulations until after royal assent. So here are some examples of things we don't yet know. And I actually wouldn't worry about any of these because there's no conspiracy in it. This is normal when a bill is going through Parliament. But I still think it's important for you to know what we do know and what we don't know. So the first one, and I've alluded to this already, the commencement date. We don't know when the big bang date will be, when all existing tenancies and transition to the new tenancy system. And we don't know how much notice we'll get after royal assent of the new commencement date. And so that's a really big thing. We do not know. The next one is we don't know what the transition obligations are going to be for landlords and letting agents. We don't know what we'll legally have to do when the Renters' Rights Act comes into force. So there's bound to be a new How to Rent guide, and we'll need to serve that. We'll need to have given a written statement about the terms of the tenancies, but we don't yet know whether the previous one's okay, that if we had a tenancy agreement, even though some of the terms will be null and void. And the reason we don't know that is because the regulations haven't been published yet. The next thing we don't know much about is the private sector database. We don't know what will be in it, how much it will cost landlords, the deadlines for uploading documents, or even what the documents will be, the exact scope of publicly accessible information, how it will integrate with other databases. For instance, we don't know if there's going to be a new database for gas safety certificates and EICRs, electrical installation condition reports. That would make sense because they have them for EPC, so why not those? And we don't know the launch date. We're still completely in the dark about the database. And it's the same with the private rented sector landlord ombudsman. We don't know who's going to be running it. We think it probably is going to be the same person that runs the ombudsman service for social housing. We don't know how much it will cost landlords both to join, and if a tenant takes a complaint to the ombudsman, we don't know if we're going to have to pay something extra. We don't know how long they'll take to decide cases. And we also don't know whether the Ombudsman will be able to step back from the everyday cases and take a strategic view and make comments on any systemic problems in the private rented sector. The Decent Home Standard. We know very little about how the Decent Home Standard, which is currently used in social housing, how it will be adapted for the private rented sector. And we don't know, for instance, whether kitchens and bathrooms will need to be a specific age or whether they're just going to see whether or not they're in good condition. We also don't know who will decide if a property meets a Decent Home Standard. Is it some sort of self-certification that landlords or letting agents are going to have to do? Or is it that there'll be a third party like there is with if you want an EPC, whether somebody else would come along and say, yes, this is good, or no, it's not, and you need to do that. And if you need to do that, we don't know whether the government will be offering any funding to meet the Decent Home Standard. I mean, I'm guessing not, but, I don't have a crystal ball. And finally, AWAB's law. We don't know the precise requirements for landlords, for private landlords. So, for instance, the deadlines for investigating reports of serious hazards like really bad damp and mold, and for completing repairs. And we don't know whether or not we'll have extensions to the deadlines due to factors beyond our control, such as contractor availability or tenants refusing access. It would seem to be very unfair if landlords were found to breach the law if the tenants won't let contractors in to sort out the problem. And finally, let me debunk some of the myths that are about the bill. What's definitely not true about the Renters' Rights Bill, so far as we know it. Because my emails and messages have been full of all sorts of myths and rumours about the bill. So I'm going to go through them now. Number one, it's not true that a landlord won't be able to ask for a guarantor if the tenant can't pay the rent, for instance, a parent. Number two, it's not true that landlords won't be able to manage their own properties if they live more than 45 minutes away. I kid you not, I honestly got a message about this. Goodness knows which letting agent said that. There's nothing at all about property management in the Renters' Rights Bill. So if you manage your properties yourself, you're going to be able to continue doing it. But of course, you should learn about the Renters' Rights Bill. And the fact that you're listening to this video and you've got this far means that you are learning about the Renters' Rights Bill. The next thing is that no-fault evictions will be abolished. That's just simply not true. Section 21 no-fault evictions will be abolished, but landlords will still be able to evict tenants for no-fault reasons, as I said before, like the landlord wanting to sell up or move back in. They'll just have to use the procedure under Section 8 and provide evidence to the court that they meet the relevant ground. but they'll still be able to evict a tenant when the tenant isn't in the wrong. The next myth, and I've seen this a lot, is people are saying that the bill is going to stop landlords from increasing rent. That's simply not true. There'll just be a different process to follow. And in a similar vein, the bill does not introduce rent controls. Now, tenants will have a greater right of appeal against rent increases, but that's not the same as rent controls. And finally, existing tenancies will not end on the commencement date. They'll continue, they'll just be assured tenancies rather than assured short hold tenancies. Wow, we got through a lot today. But if you want to learn more about the Renters' Rights Bill, you can take my free training course here on YouTube. It's called Renters' Rights Bill Explained. And I provide regular updates. So subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out, because I'm putting out content all the time and it's all really practical. And if you don't want to subscribe, please at least give the video a thumbs up because that helps. See you soon.